I'm Phil Liggett and this is the Wheelhouse.
Well, hello and welcome to a very special edition of the Wheelhouse Cycling Podcast. We're in Adelaide for the Tour Down Under. My normal co-host, Joel Spreadborough, well, he's on a beach in Thailand somewhere, so I've had to rustle up some talent. And we've got the wonderful Sophie Smith here, author, journalist. You've got a Tour de France book. Soph, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm a huge fan of this podcast, so it's my pleasure.
Well, to get it out of the way, Joel's actually asked me to call you Jolene.
Right,
just
okay.
so things aren't a bit too changed.
I mean,
are you okay with that?
I'm a Dolly Parton fan, so I'm down with that.
Working 9 to 5. Before we go into it, can we just pause for a moment? Because the voice of cycling, the great Phil Liggett, he introduced our show. So do you think we've made it? Is that it?
He's
Can we
amazing,
go home now?
Isn't he? Maybe. How do you follow that?
I don't know. I mean, I literally had to stand in line to even get to him. And I know him so well, but that's outside the Adelaide Hilton, which is the headquarters for the Tour Down Under. There's just people that harass him left, right and centre.
He's always popular. He's almost, I would say, a bigger attraction than some of the riders.
Oh,
which they won't like me for saying.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
And still so down to earth. Like you see him in the Hilton lobby and he'll still stop and say hello. And
he's so chill. Well, he is sporting 4 broken ribs after a boating accident. So I'm not sure whether that will make him bigger on screen, or I guess we'll have to wait and see. Now we've
a bit more raspy.
Like a little bit, still a beautiful voice.
Exactly.
We've scoured high and low for a pretty good location to record this week. We've ended up in the village bar.
By
Sophie.
coincidence. By coincidence.
Look, it's not open yet, I might add, so we don't have any overly excited pundits kind of rolling through. But if we're here for long enough, you never know what could happen.
End with a champagne.
Now, Tour Down Under, it's something pretty special. Like, I mean, obviously we're biased. We're Australian. We've been here before, and for us, it's always a bit of an adventure. But there's just something about the atmosphere, isn't there?
There is, and it's nice to be back with it not have been run for the last 2 years. But there is something about this race. Everyone used to say, "Oh, it's relaxed," and I don't think it's relaxed anymore in terms of the racing being a World Tour event, men's and women's now. But you know, it is. There are many reasons I come here, and it's not just because there's a free bar and pizza in the press room. That is a draw card.
Hold on, that is a draw card.
But
Come on now.
Not just that, but you know, the racing is competitive. The weather's amazing, and I think everyone that's here actually just really does enjoy the event. You've got the luxury of staying in the same hotel for the entire duration. You're not lugging your suitcase everywhere. Every day.
That's a good point. And let's delve into that for a second, because a normal race that you're following, Soph, because you go around the world, you go to the Tour de France, you follow the Grand Tours, the classics, you name it. But for those, literally each day you move to a new hotel.
Yeah.
You're in and out.
Yeah.
But at the Tour Down Under, you stay in the one hotel, because
it's amazing.
All of the racing departs
so
from in and around Adelaide.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And how good is that for the riders? I mean, does that make the riders more relaxed when you're interviewing them, do you think?
I think so. And just in general, I would say it improves the racing, but everyone is more relaxed, maybe a little bit more approachable, or just not even as fatigued. Like, it's easy for me to say because I'm not riding a couple hundred kilometres every day in 40-degree heat. But I think with recovery and that sort of thing, like, you're not having massive transfers that eat into your recovery time. You're not having dinner at 10 p.m. at night because you've got stuck in traffic or, you know, whatever.
Yes.
The transfer times are reasonable. You're having dinner at the same time every night, and you actually have a little bit of an opportunity to socialise as well. So it's a nice way to start the season.
God forbid, socialise. What's
that?
Although I did hear a couple of years ago that some of the Spanish teams didn't really love Tour Down Under because the food hall where they eat their meals at night closes at 8 p.m.
Right.
And for them, they don't even want to eat until 10
time.
p.m. And so they asked the organisers if they could actually keep it open later.
Wow.
They got a no.
Oh, really?
So I reckon they're having Wheat Bix in their rooms at 10 p.m.
Yeah.
Let's dive into it before we do TDU, because that kicks off. There's so much to dive into there. But last weekend, we had the Aussie Road Nationals, and it feels like such a special event, not just for the Aussies, but the whole world of road cycling has been on hiatus and holidays. And all of a sudden, everybody turns to inevitably Mount Buninyong, to Ballarat, to watch the season start again with our summer of cycling.
Yeah.
In the elites, we had some pretty incredible rides. I mean, it's in the women, Brodie Chapman winning the road race. It's one of those goosebump moments. It really was. She's such a she's like the people's rider.
She's great,
Sophie.
isn't she? Yeah. And she has such an interesting, like, just story, you know, from where she grew up and her rise, you know, through to the ranks. It was really nice to see her actually come out with a victory. And she backed herself as well. Like, I've always got this focus with athletes on, obviously, and you would know this, you have to have the physical goods. But I think for me and my experience interviewing athletes, a lot of it can be mental as well, and in those key moments, like backing yourself and having the conviction to see it through, and she had that.
One of the things I love about her is that she's been pretty open that she's had some mental health struggles, but she sees it as her secret weapon because she knows when she's vulnerable, and that gives her strength. It almost allows her, when she's feeling good, to know that she's unshakable, and I really like that. And her mum is in a chat group that I'm in, and she sends photos and updates on Brodie all the time. And when Brodie was racing, she was sending pictures of like nobody was watching. Which was a little bit funny. But if we look at the men's road race, I can't believe it. Lucas Plapp, year after year, like how.
All of his professional wins have come from the national championships.
Yes, he's now second year professional. 2 green and gold jerseys. It's not insignificant to go back to back.
No, it's not. And particularly on that course, I think the thing with the national championships is, the Australian national championships, is that the course is fixed. And there's been lots of conjecture over the years as to whether it should change every year. But, you know, you do sometimes see different types of riders. You know, there are sprinters that have to be at the top of their game in January that can win. There's climbers that can win. And that course and the conditions every year, it is a race of attrition. It's, you know, you say that so often it starts to sound like a cliche, but for him to, you know, he's still quite young, and it, like this, as you know, like many talented Australian riders, and they all take that race very seriously. I think one thing that Australians are really big on is it's not lost on them representing their country, and what an honour and privilege that is. So when they come to Buninyong, and it's really random, it is kind of, you've got all these world-class cyclists descend onto this small, I guess you could call it, country town. So for him to, again, you know, conviction, to have to form the conviction to succeed there and successfully defend a title, and alone, like he didn't have any trade teammates there, like hats off.
And with 100k to go, he looked crap, honestly. Like, he looked done for the day. It was pretty hot down there as well. And I thought, look, I'm glad he's defended his title, but I don't think it's his day. And then he just started to look, it's like he swapped with the others. Everybody that looked comfortable started wiggling around.
Yeah.
And he just came into his own. I'm so impressed. We'll see him at TDU this week. And
it is impressive because I haven't interviewed Luke a lot, but he's a December baby like me. And not only is he a December baby, his birthday is Christmas Day. So for him to have a birthday, have Christmas, have New Year, and come out in early January and do that,
it's been a big time.
I'm looking forward to seeing him here.
Did he get his full Ineos team kit for the year already? And now he'll just essentially end up with 2 kits?
I don't know.
Can we ask him that?
Potentially.
Yeah.
We can ask him, not potentially.
Let's ask him that. To the time trials, Grace Brown.
Isn't she great?
Isn't she great?
Yeah. And she's really coming into her own as well. She had a fantastic season last year with multiple wins. At the World Championships, we were both there. She was in the hot seat I thought she had that right up until Ellen Van Dijk was.
Oh, I know. And we loved Ellen's win, but Grace is so close.
Yeah. But I think for her, again, to defend a title, that's, you know, that's no mean feat. That's hard. I often ask athletes, I'm like, what's harder, like winning it the first time or winning it the second time, the third time?
I reckon it's harder to back up. And I also think for riders like Grace, she's now doing so well internationally that in her earlier days, she was able to really focus on nationals, and that was her whole season. But now that she's at such demand by her team, FDJ, for international races, the nationals kind of pale in significance. And so for her to still be on that form this early, I think is really impressive. But in the men, this one's exciting.
You just go.
I know, I get animated and excited because Jay Vine stepped up to take his first green and gold jersey.
On his first race participation.
Yes. Look, I'm so pumped. We had him in the Wheelhouse bunker before Christmas, he and Bree, and he talked about how determined he was to do time trials. He's a numbers man, Sophie. He was like, in his head, I imagine it's like the Matrix.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
he talked about how for him, he'd seen his data. He knew that he could be a good time trialist, that it was a very big thing heading over to Team UAE because they were going to put the time into setting him up on his bike. So he went to a training camp in December with them, the first time he was in that team environment. He got a new bike. He did wind tunnel testing. He got set up. January, the national time trial had a massive, mark on it for him, and he bloody did it.
Yeah. Yeah. And one thing I picked up in his post-race interview was that he spoke about the importance of having that proper setup. I mean, for you, like, how important is that in something like as technical as a time trial? Like, can that be the difference between winning and losing?
Physically, yes. Aerodynamically, yes. Psychologically,
No.
overwhelmingly, yes.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that the first time I ever got on my perfect setup for me time trial bike, it was like putting a Wonder Woman cape on.
Yeah.
Like it all comes together, and it's a really cool feeling. And I think there's something about Jay's journey that I really connect with because he's so methodical the way he steps through it.
Yeah.
But amongst that, you could think that he's a bit of a machine. But the emotion he shows afterwards and that he and his wife Bree share, that's where it peels back and you see that he's not a machine at all.
Yeah.
And that those two sides that come together is quite beautiful.
It's quite, yeah.
Yeah. Now, I haven't got it yet, but I'm waiting. I'm checking my emails every 2 minutes because we are here in Adelaide with the Wheelhouse, with Zwift and with Champ Sis, and also the Grow Getters Group, who own a company called Pissay in Australia. Now, they have nailed it, hit it out of the park, and got a sponsorship deal with UAE. So it's pretty exciting for the Wheelhouse because now we're like pretty much part of UAE, right? I mean,
You saw it. You had the
little bit.
vision. You called it early.
But they are hustling now to design a suit for him because the first stage of the men's here at the TDU for the first time ever is a prologue. So he's going to get to wear this beautiful new skin suit. So they're hustling. I need to talk to them a little bit more about exactly what it takes to get this done, quick sticks. But they are rushing everything to get it done for him. And I reckon that'll be
From what you've said, though, I
pretty
wonder
exciting
if
to
he
see him in
lined
that.
up, irrespective of what he was wearing on that particular day, or being a new kit, and just thought, yeah, this is mine. I've won this today.
Yeah, I reckon he might have.
Because there were lots of people afterwards, or, the reports in the media where it was an upset win, and he's got such a unique rise to the top, I guess you could say.
Backstory with talent ID.
But I wonder, just from what you've said there and how he's a numbers man, if the result of that was decided in his head before he even rolled down the ramp.
Well, I'm glad you said, was it an upset? Because I think that is how so many people view it. But simply my chat with him in December, for me, it wasn't.
Yeah.
Because the other thing he mentioned was his intense focus on one of the stages here, which is to Campbelltown and the Corkscrew, stage 3.
And we know he can climb.
And we know he can climb. And he has said that he's watched it in the past. He's never ridden it, but he's watched it in the past. And for him, he's seen it as one of the most iconic moments in Australian racing at all. Like, forget Wollonga. For him, it's the Corkscrew. So, yeah, our Wheelhouse team, we've got some cardboard. We've got some Posca pens, which is a paint pen for anybody who doesn't have a child and enjoy crafting.
Okay.
And we're going to make him a poster.
Amazing.
And it's going to say #GetWreckJ, and we're going to wave it around and have a little bit of fun. Because I reckon, that's his day. He's already said that back in December when he said about the time trial. And I think he's proving to be one of those riders where when he says, hold my beer, you hold his beer.
You hold his beer.
Yeah. It'll be
So
interesting.
jumping ahead a bit here, if you start with a prologue and we're finishing with climbs, could he foreseeably lead the race from start to finish?
Yes. I reckon he can. So the women go up the Corkscrew as well.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the women's first before we talk about whether Jay Vine can win the whole thing. We're going to come back to that.
You just said, we know where you stand with that.
I know.
Call the bookie.
Yes. Well, look, this is the Wheelhouse. I'm Kate Bates. I'm joined by Sophie Smith. We're going to dive into the women's TDU. That kicks off first. Both the men and the women have a crit. I'm going to ask the question, is a crit legit in a World Tour race?
Well, I guess it's not Part of the race? Are you talking about the classic?
Oh, I'm talking about the Schwalbe.
Yeah,
Classic.
okay. See, I have never counted that as part of the race. I kind of look at that as a blow out the cobwebs from the off season.
Well, and it's not technically part of the race. So it's not,
but it is
UCI
like
ranked,
racing starts on that particular day.
Yeah.
For me, if I was an athlete, I'd almost be a bit nervous doing it.
Oh,
If
right.
you crash in that race and and do a collarbone or a wrist or something like that, that's start of your season derailed.
They've got the team's presentation as well, and you might cast your mind back and remember Matt White at the Tour de France on his debut, and he broke his collarbone riding to the team presentation.
Yep.
Going over a media cable.
Yep.
There's
I think
so-
he knocked himself out as well. I think I spoke to him about this for a book I wrote that was published last year that I don't verbatim quote me on this, but I actually think he said it took him years to get like a Tour de France start. The year before, 48 hours beforehand, they called him and said, no, sorry, we've changed our mind. And from memory, I think he said he just remembers riding over like a piping or something, the road was wet, and that's it. The next thing was he woke up in the age hospital or something like that. It's not funny.
Why are we laughing?
It's not funny.
No, but
it didn't happen to us, that's why.
But it's a really good point about the crit, because there would be quite a few riders who are not looking forward to it.
But I guess the upside is you could also, if you look at it from a positive,
Ever
is that
the
there's a lot
optimist,
of
aren't you?
not really, but we'll fake it. Fake it till you make it. There's a lot of, we were talking about this before, there's a lot of debutantes here, start of the season, there's lots of people that have changed teams, so in a way it could be good. It could be a good way to, I guess, get the nerves out a little bit, sort of get an early indication of how you're going to ride with these men or these women, so that come stage one proper, you've got a little bit of familiarity there.
Yeah, I mean, on the plus side, I'm going to go the positive side as well. I think it's entertainment, right? They get paid because it's entertainment and people watch around the world. And there's going to be a lot of people watching who don't even know what a World Tour versus a not World Tour race is. They don't know about points and systems. They don't care.
Yeah.
They just want to watch it.
And you can do that with a criterium. You see more,
Yes.
you're going to see more than a minute's worth of action because they're going round and round in circles.
Exactly. Well, so for the women, they do the crit, and then the next day is stage one. They've got 3 stages. This year we've had a bit of a change in race direction. So normally it was Kimberly Conti running the ship. She's moved on. Carly Taylor and Annette Edmondson are now primarily in charge of the women's race. The course is a cracker. Yeah,
it's good,
isn't it? They've got I've got in front of me here the Santos Tour Down Under official program. It's like a broadsheet newspaper
multitasking here.
I know.
Microphone.
It's got Caleb on the front looking very resplendent, but it's got all the info in here, including all of the courses. And they've essentially designed the women's course to have one stage for the sprinters, one stage for the climbers, and one stage for the puncheurs.
Yeah,
really.
which I think is great. They sort of did something similar with the Tour de France Femmes last year, but I think it's a great way to A, get people to the start line, and B, cater for the diverse array of riders in the peloton.
Yes. Well, let's start by talking a little bit about the start list. We'll address the elephant in the room, and I'm not talking about the weight I gained over Christmas. The pudding was really good, by the way. I'd do it again. But we've got 15 women's teams in the World Tour. Only 6 of them are here. What do we think about that?
We were talking about this. There's many different avenues to this. You put me on the spot now.
You're never going to come back. You're like, really, Kate? Really? Give me dirty looks.
I mean, it is in a way. It is what it is. I think it's still going to be competitive racing, and I don't know the official reason as to why not every World Tour team is here. I would previously with women's cycling, there has been issues with budget, so it might be that the teams haven't been able to afford to come out because it is a long way. It is a long way to come to Australia.
And COVID pricing, like airfares are ridiculous.
COVID,
now, right?
exactly. So there's that, and you're not just bringing yourself and your bike. You're bringing soigneurs and chefs and
the full entourage.
Whatever the full entourage.
Well, officially, the Tour Down Under have said that it is pretty much that related, and complicated by the fact that for the Women's World Tour, the teams aren't obliged to ride all of the World Tour races. So the men's teams have to send a team to every race that is classified as a World Tour race, no exceptions.
Yeah.
With the women, the women's teams can still pick and choose a little bit. It's a bit disappointing for me because I can't help but want to defend Adelaide when they can choose to come or not, and they choose not to come.
Yeah, I think maybe you have to look at, if you're going to defend the teams that don't, if you look at it in terms of the women's calendar, like, this is great to be here on the start line if you have early season objectives. It's amazing. And we've seen men's cycling previously, they won't just come out for this race, they come out for a block. So they'll get here like after Christmas or early New Year, and it's a month on the road of training and racing in good weather with the, and that being said, the classics are an objective, and the Giro, which is in the first half of the year. The women's calendar operates a bit differently, or runs to a different schedule, I guess you could say. But it's a World Tour event. It would have been nice to see more World Tour teams here, particularly because the World Tour teams have expanded. But
yeah, come on, guys, come out. I mean, for the Aussie fans, it's like winner chicken dinner, because the creme de la creme of Aussie cyclists in the Pro Tour are here.
Yeah.
And I think that we've got some incredible international riders that have come to Adelaide, but I really think that our big contenders are going to come from the Australian contingent. And you mentioned before, like, they come out and train in the beautiful weather. It's 38 degrees.
It's not.
That's about 15 degrees past beautiful in my book. But it only kind of adds to the advantage that the Aussies have, who have been here for the whole summer, who might tolerate it a bit more.
I think so. And that's where advantage for them. They've had a taste of it in Buninyong as well. But a lot of them, having said that, do come from Europe. They live in Europe now. So
this is true. And the tour last year was very, very hot.
It was.
Where they were watering down the roads because it was so hot.
Yeah. Cycling's are traditionally, well, I guess, a lot of it is held in good weather. So I think it's more a shock to the system for them when they go back to Europe, actually.
Yeah.
And then they're lining up at the classics where it's...
Well, that's a really interesting perspective, actually, because so often at TDU we're talking about it's an advantage for the Aussies because it's hot. But if you actually dial back the hysteria, I'm not known for that at all, Sophie, so... and you think that it's very hot in Europe in summer.
Yeah.
So it might be a bit of a shock to them coming from the winter, but it doesn't mean that they can't tolerate it. The women are racing 294k in total. They are going over the corkscrew. It's going to be a tough day out for them. I spoke to Rachel Nayland this morning at the team hotel. She had a few interesting things to say.
For us, it's obviously higher stakes, more points. So it's really the intensity of the racing is going to be higher. It's going to be a faster race. There's a lot more at stake at the end. It's a lot more prestige to win a World Tour race than just a 0.1. So I think it's just going to be hotter and harder and faster. But also everything around the race really steps up. So the accommodation is better. The organisation, and it's really sort of a lot more tightly wrapped into the men's race, which is fantastic for us. I always feel a little bit of, good energy. And, you really need to take that because we don't race in front of home crowds at all, like never. So it's, I wouldn't call it pressure. I would just call it a nice amount of anticipation and pride, really, to be able to race in the green and gold and share my experience with the younger girls. And that's really my role this week. And just super excited to race on home soil. I think the Aussies do have an advantage, having gotten used to the heat a little bit and having, knowing the roads, and also just the extra buzz of racing at home. So I really think that Amanda Spratt is really quite a hot favourite, and Grace Brown as well. I think the two of them, obviously Ruby, Alex, the Bike Exchange girls. I think it's going to be a really, really, really hard race. The stages are quite short, so they're going to be intense, and the heat will play a big factor.
She's a cracker. Sophie, there's a bit of enthusiasm in her face and a sparkle in her eye. I reckon she didn't say it directly, but I reckon she's got her eye on a few stages as well.
I don't doubt it. Rachel's been competing for a very long time, and she's never lost that enthusiasm or that passion for racing. She's always prepared. She's always thinking about the next step or what's around the corner. She's earned her spot in the peloton, that's for sure. And again, she's one that's particularly proud to represent Australia.
Oh, so proud. So she'll be riding here for UniSA. Her pro team, Cofidis, they chose not to come. Meant to be starting with them, but will not be a starter, is Chloe Hosking. Chloe got a last-minute reprieve from Donna Ray and Oz Cycling to have a spot for the crit, but unfortunately she's sick, so we won't see her. But I want to touch on Chloe, because normally in this style race we would have the crit plus another stage really earmarked for her. She's Australia's most successful female cyclist on the sprint front. And at this stage, her retirement race will be at the Cadel Evans Great Ocean Road Race with the national team, because she was part of the B&B Hotels team that collapsed.
Yeah.
And she's now running out of options. The only word I can really use to describe it is totally crap. What a crappy ecosystem where that can happen to a rider of that calibre.
This is the reality of cycling, sadly, still to this day. And we can sit here and say, oh, where are the World Tour teams? Why haven't they come out? And yeah, it'd be great to see them here. But the reality is that cycling's business model is still I've always compared it to a house of cards. And things like team collapses like this happen.
That was such a good mini series, wasn't it? Pretty dark. There's a few dark moments in cycling.
But teams, and it's horrible to see because you're talking about people's livelihoods. But teams they're there one year and they're not there, and they're not there the next. And the reality of that is, I remember Oleg Tinkov years ago with a men's team. He described that as his toy, and I was like, that's the life. He's like, if I get bored of my toy, I just throw it out. And he was in and out of the sport relatively quickly. And you're talking about the reality of, you can say it's a house of cards and this and that. The reality is you're talking about people's livelihoods. And when it's, it comes down to it's January, the season started, and people are still looking for teams. And sometimes they find them. It happened to Simon Clark last year in the men's ranks, and he went on to win a stage of the Tour de France.
Oh, a memorable one too.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's just the hard part about cycling.
Yeah.
And a reality is that you can, no matter how good you are or what history you have in the sport, you can be found wanting through circumstances that are not your own fault.
No, and we wish Chloe all the very best in her recovery, so that if in fact Cadel Evans Great Ocean Road Race is her final race, that it's a real clanger for her. I'm Kate Bates. This is The Wheelhouse. I'm here with Sophie Smith. Joel Spreadborough, normal co-host. He's on the beach in Thailand somewhere. So Sophie is more than filling his boots here. I haven't called you Jolene yet. I'll try not to. We're talking about all things Summer of Cycling and Tour Down Under. Chloe Hosking, she may not go back to the pro peloton this year. Speaking of sprinters who are riding outside their teams, Caleb Ewan, he's at the Tour Down Under. Sophie, he's riding for UniSA in the national team. That's a little bit odd. He graces the cover of the Tour the Village magazine in his Lotto colours, but Lotto Destiny have decided not to come. Gee, I'm glad Caleb is still here.
Yeah, it's strange that and I'm sure, again, they were relegated last year, so maybe their focus I guess is on achieving points this season as well as results and getting that World Tour status back. But I haven't spoken to anyone from the team as to the reason for not coming. But Caleb is the face of that squad. He's their main draw card. They don't have a general class. They don't have a Grand Tour contender. They have a multiple Tour de France.
They have a
stage
Caleb
winner. So he has trade teammates in the national team with him, but I don't think I've seen that before.
Yeah, and I mean, it does kind of raise the question, if the teams aren't forced to come like the World Tour teams have to come, now that Lotto Destiny is a Pro Tour team, they get to choose and pick a little bit, and we may see a bit of a change in what they target, but I reckon there are a few people in the organising committee here at SA Tourism that sighed with relief when he was announced as riding for the national team, because it would be a massive omission to not have him here. But you kind of can't go past the fact that we've got some massive names here. So the men's race, 673k. It's 6 stages, a 5.5k prologue to kick it off. We talked about that earlier with Jay Vine. It's been running since 1999. So it's well and truly established.
It's a long time, isn't it?
It is. Aussies have dominated it. We've won it 13 times. One of the riders back is Louis Leon Sanchez. He's a former winner. This is his 13th edition.
Yeah.
Oh, he's riding for Astana. We've seen him in a whole smattering of different team jerseys over the years. The Aussie that we expect to be here for Israel Premier Tech, it will be his 12th, the most experienced Aussie rider, Simon Clark. But Sophie, I believe he's got a bit of the spicy cough.
That's what I've heard as well.
Oh.
But I think that my understanding is the team is monitoring the situation. So he's not necessarily out. He's just been delayed in arriving in Adelaide.
Yes.
TBC.
They haven't printed the start list yet. They are waiting on that one. I really hope that we do see him here. He is one of the most exciting
And he was in
Aussie
shape
riders.
at Nationals, yeah?
Yes.
On the podium at Nationals.
Yes. Well, I think a lot has changed kind of in one way post-COVID, but the reality is it is still going on and it is still affecting some things. We've got quite a lot of debutantes racing. So if there's 140 riders in total, but 80 of them have never graced the streets of Adelaide before. That's a pretty big, that's like nearly 60%. That's a pretty big margin.
It's a big margin, but also I think that's one of the beauty of these races as well is you have someone that comes in and they're a debutant and they sort of fly under the radar here. Egan Bernal won the white jersey here, I don't know how many years ago now, 4 or 5 maybe.
Just roll with it.
Barely spoke a word of English. No one knew who he was. And I believe either the next year or the year after that, he won the Tour de France. So sometimes these debutantes, it's easy to sort of overlook them. But
meteoric rises, right?
They go on sometimes very quickly to do massive things and become household names.
I always think about Jonas Vingegaard when I think about the meteoric rise because he literally got his pro contract because his manager sent his Strava files around the world tour and said, "Come on, guys, someone's got to sign
really
in."
Savvy manager.
I know, right?
He asked me for an increased commission.
I know. Let's talk about the riders that are here that we're looking forward to. Very strong Aussie contingent. It's
Absolutely.
like they've all come home. We've got Giro star Jai Hindley, and I'm going to pause there for a second. Joel and I have some pronunciation issues here, Sophie. You're a little bit more cultured in this regard, I think, than us. Sorry, Joel. Jai, we know it's Jai like why. Like why, Jai?
Yep.
Hindley or Hindley?
I say Hindley.
Hindley, okay.
I feel like we just need to ask him.
Yeah, we do. We will. So Jai Hindley, we're going to go with it.
Next podcast, we'll confirm.
Yes, TBC, everybody. You've spoken to him, Soph. Is this a target for him or is this just a way for him to interact with his fans and come home and enjoy a summer before going back and looking for another Grand Tour?
He's downplayed his ambitions to go for the general classification here. He's pointed to a couple of other teammates. I think last season, we know it was huge for him in terms of becoming the first Australian to win the Giro. There was a lot of emotions that came with that. And at the end of it, he finished his season at the World Championships. It was the first time he's been allowed back into Australia for almost 3 years. But I think one of the big lessons from him last year was actually learning how to deal with fame, like the attention that comes from, and he spoke about this when we had a chat over the phone before we both reached Adelaide. He spoke about just not being, and I guess you can't be prepared for that until it happens, but being pulled in every which way direction. And then that was in Europe and coming back to Australia and doing the Vuelta in between there. He sort of said he got through the off season and it was amazing to give back and do all these engagements. But when he had to start training again, he felt as tired as he did when he finished the season. Having said that, I think he's got some very, very big objectives this year. So I think he was meant to be at Nationals and he didn't compete. I'm not sure what happened there. So he's underplaying a role here. I think he himself just wants to sort of get an idea. This is the first chance in the season where everyone can sort of measure up what they've each done in training and whether their own training is kind of, around the benchmark of their rivals. So I get the feeling he'll be more doing that, but I think Jai still thinks he can play, like you mentioned it before with Jay Vine. This is going to get confusing.
Jai, why Jai
flying under
and
the,
hey Jay?
Yeah, like flying under the radar or people being surprised by a result. I think Jai still thinks he can fly under the radar this year, and I can't you're the first Australian to win the Giro. I can't see that happening.
Why,
And maybe
Jai?
Jay-
Why would you think that?
maybe Jay will be the same. So that's another TBC. He's not come out and said, "Yep, my intention is to win the Tour Down Under." But we now know how much of a class rider he is. So
do you know what I love
you wouldn't
most
rule
about
it
this
out either.
combo is that we're jumping from Aussie to Aussie to Aussie,
Yeah.
who thinks they maybe can fly under the radar, which we find comical because they're so good. Because another one that has turned up, we like to fondly call him here at the Wheelhouse, Sophie Glutes O'Connor.
Right.
Glutes O'Connor, thanks to his glute injury at the Tour
I was
de
going to
France.
say, what's that pertain to?
Let me be very clear about that. And his attitude through that, we just loved it. Like Joel and I, of all the interviews we were listening to, we just loved how relaxed he was about it all. Injured, had the weight of expectation on his shoulders, but so focused and so methodical about it all. I'm just really excited to have him back in Australia and us be able to see him race. I can't wait to see Jay, this is going to get confusing, and Glutes, racing up the corkscrew.
Yeah. And I saw Ben at the Tour last year when he had that injury. And even, there was one stage he got off his bike and he winced as he was getting off his bike. He downplayed it later. He just went, it was a muscle tear or whatever. But to do those stages, he couldn't, he got off his bike. He was wincing when he got off his bike. He was wincing when he got onto the bus. But mentally, he sort of never wavered. He was just sort of very calm, very approachable the whole way through, and then went on to do the Vuelta as well. So for a long time, the focus, and particularly in men's cycling, has been on sprinters because there's a lot of road cycling in Australia starts on the track, but we've now got this crop of climbers that are winning, not even have the potential to win Grand Tours, but are winning Grand Tours, or as Ben did, finishing fourth on debut a couple of years ago.
He's remarkable. The Aussie fans, they have so much to cheer about this week. I reckon we might see a few different and interesting names coming out of it. So many debutantes, I'm so sure we'll see one or two of them step up, and we'll be frantically Googling them to figure out
I'm trying to spy the start list.
Yeah, we do have the provisional start list up here. Let's call it that. I know so many asterisks. Michael Matthews for Jaco Alula, he's in great form. He was on the podium at the National Championships, but we know from his style of racing that some of the courses that the men follow, it's not too different to the women's in that they've got a bit of climbing in there. They've got a bit for the sprinters. They've got a few of those delightful stages that the sprinters can get over if they're on the right day. Otherwise, they'll hate them. But I would think that Michael Matthews would be in for a really good shot for a couple of stage wins.
I imagine he'd be targeting stage wins. They've also got Simon Yates in the team, who I haven't spoken to him, but might have a crack at the general classification. Yes. But I've got all the time in the world for Michael Matthews. He's a consummate professional, and throughout his career, his rivals have been generational talent. He first faced Peter Sagan, and now it's Wout van Aert and Mathieu van der Poel and people like this. And last year when he won that stage of the Tour de France, he was, people in the press room were genuinely, this never happens, were genuinely like, you know what, he deserved that. And he almost reinvented himself.
It never happens. What a miserable bunch of
about that another time.
Yeah.
No, but you get invested, I guess, in a way. He reinvented himself that day. He sort of, where he's normally would win stages from reduced bunch sprints, he against another crop of generational rivals has, found a way to win. Yes. That was a solo victory, and he performed at the World Championships last year as well. There was so much pressure on his shoulders being a home World Championships.
Yeah, you chatted to him there, and he seemed pretty relaxed, Soph, but that
he felt that pressure, though.
He
knew. And it was so much that I spoke to people behind the scenes, so within sports psychologists, and they're like, oh, no, there's too much pressure. He's feeling the pressure. He's, being approached every other day on the street, and he finished third.
Not bad for under pressure.
So, yeah, he can handle it. Handle it.
Ineos have a cracking squad here. Luke Plapp, he'll be resplendent in his green and gold. But Geraint Thomas, crowd favourite, he's got some new sunnies, Soph.
He does.
Is this good or bad? We've talked about, Joel and I before, his devotion to his Oakleys.
Yeah.
To the one star.
Well, they became a trademark, didn't they?
I know, but they're gone. I mean, is this like Amanda Spratt's now with Trek? She's no longer Spratty Blue Shoes. Is this a good thing? when the one lucky thing goes.
Well, I think
It's Friday the 13th, I'm going to add.
He had, don't say that. He had, if he put something up on Twitter the other day, he's actually got, who's their new sponsor? Is it Sun God?
Sun God, I think.
Something like that. They've actually done it, so he's got the white rims now.
Oh,
so
they've actually tried to make them
sort
more
of diverse.
Oakley look.
Yeah, not an Oakley look, but the same colour.
How very correct.
Different make, same colour.
They've also got the Hayter brothers here. I'm so excited by this because I'm a big fan of Leo and Ethan Hayter. I've watched them develop through the ranks. Their dad's really funny on social media, I might add. Go look him up after you look us up and follow us first. But they're racing together for the first time in the World Tour because, you know, going up from under 23s and from juniors.
Yeah.
It'll just be really interesting to me to see whether they have that meteoric rise or whether the weight of expectation on their shoulders will see them stall a little bit on the way through.
Yeah.
But between the Hayters and Luke Plapp and Magnus Sheffield as well, the American who's come from a skiing background, and in fact, slight detour, but he was actually quoted in the off-season as considering having a break from professional cycling to go back to Nordic skiing.
As you do.
So there you go. But Geraint Thomas, he'll actually play quite a big leadership role now.
Absolutely.
As well as us wanting to see him win. But he's like the old man in the team now. Sorry, G.
He's my age, so let's not say
old. Oh, sorry. Okay, all right.
No, but he's very experienced, and I guess, you know, that some of these riders would now be looking up to him as a role model. And we saw what he did at the Tour de France last year, finishing on the podium. That you just don't discount him, and that was huge because this doesn't so much seem to be a thing in women's cycling, but in men's cycling now it is the younger riders that are winning. This culture used to be that you come in, you earn your stripes, and then you start winning years later. Cadel Evans took years, you know, it was years in the making when he won the Tour de France. Whereas now you're seeing these riders come out of, well, not juniors, but under 23, and in their first year or their second year, they're winning major races. So in terms of looking at what can they do, will they live up to the hype, that's always been an interesting thing. Sometimes good juniors don't make good pros.
Well, no, and speaking of the young ones, in the women's, the youngest rider, and it's a World Tour race, is Izzy Carnes. She's stepped up from juniors. She's 18 still, not even turned 19. And in the men, it's not too dissimilar. We've also got some youngsters going there, but Zach Marriage is the youngest, and he's only just turned 19. So even on the Australian front, all of a sudden we've got these exceptionally young, really baby-faced
starting
athletes.
Big races. This isn't a small race.
No.
And people come here to race
and to win.
Yeah. There's points, there's, you know, and you can never discount a victory, I don't think. That's part of the year because it can create momentum that lasts throughout the entire season.
Yeah, exactly. Sophie, before we wrap up, I'm going to put you on the spot.
Okay.
I
You've done that a bit
should have
today.
told you this before, but yeah, no, alas. Give us a tip. Who do you reckon in the women's race we're going to see prevail in the GC and then one for the men?
The women's, I honestly don't know. And this is what I love about women's cycling at the moment is, for me, it's fascinating to watch because it is unpredictable. And it is really, you know, in some of the men's races now, you know, there's a formula to it, whereas the women's racing, it's constantly just aggressive and attack.
It's good though. It's great though.
It's amazing.
So dynamic
it's amazing.
that
It's amazing to
pick,
watch.
But I'm still going to make you.
I'm
pick
definitely
one.
going to say maybe Brodie Chapman.
Oh, good one.
Maybe.
See, because I've got a tip, and I tried to get onto Joel to get his tip, but I really think that he must be like asleep under his lounger on the beach. So I was going to give him...
He's just at the bar as opposed to working in front of it. Yeah.
I was going to give him Brodie if you didn't. So
Okay.
there you go. All right, we've got Brodie.
Jolene has stolen it.
Jolene has
First
stolen.
in. 9 to 5, baby.
If I could sing, I would right now. Alas, Joel has banned me from that too, as has Merksy behind the camera. Amanda Spratt.
Yeah.
We're like, Trek is getting some big tips from us today. The women's side. So who do we give to Joel then? Who would you
feel like he should dial in from Thailand and, you know.
No, up your game. Joel,
do a
he
bit of
will be
research.
here next week.
Yeah.
So he'll be able to debate the pros and cons, and we can't wait to have him joining us in Adelaide as well. That will be absolutely unreal. But for another woman who could possibly take the title, I'd have to say Grace Brown.
Yeah,
So I guess Joel gets Grace Brown.
that's a good call.
Yeah. All right, the men. Who's your tip for the men?
Well, you're going for Jay Vine, aren't you?
I am.
Yeah.
Yep.
I don't even have to ask you
Yep.
there. You don't know where the internationals are. That's the thing. And I know there's a long list of Australians that have won this race.
A long list.
A long
Yes.
list. But the internationals can never be discounted either. I'm curious to see who Ineos rides for.
Yes.
I don't know if that could be Plapp and have a lot of
Come
people
on, don't sit on
behind
the
him.
fence, Soph. There's really nothing on this.
I think I would say, you know what, my head says Simon Yates.
Ooh.
And my heart says Jai Hindley, even though he has said he's not. Or one of his teammates,
Okay.
who I haven't looked at the start list.
So
properly. I
just
know
to
it's right there,
clarify,
but
who are you going with? You're going with Yates.
I'll go with Yates.
Okay. Well then, Joel gets Jai.
Okay.
All right, that's clarified. We will be here the whole time at the Tour Down Under. Please like, follow, share with your friends. Encourage everybody to join us on this crazy journey. Sophie Smith, I'd like to see your Twitter
I would
bio
sing
updated
that.
for that. Thank you so much for stepping into
Thank
the
you
shoes.
for having me.
I guess, is this our way of telling Joel that he's been replaced?
Yeah.
I don't know. Sorry, Joel.
Stay in Thailand. No.
Yes, but please stay tuned. We'll have some full podcasts coming out, but also a ton on social media. So check all of your channels, pass it along. And so if I reckon it's time for a cold bevy, given the 38 degrees.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It is very hot. That is one serious thing about Tour Down Under.
Yes.
It's contending with the heat.
It is. I'm Kate Bates, joined by Sophie Smith for the Wheelhouse Cycling Podcast. Like, follow, share, and we'll see you soon. This special episode of The Wheelhouse was recorded live by River City Studios at the Tour Down Under, thanks to Zwift and the legends at Champion System Australia, Pisay and the Grow Getters Group.